Thanks for joining us for block number 3 of the podcast. We just had a great conversation with Tommi, the head of communications for Mangata Finance, and we talked about some really interesting aspects of what makes them different from other DEX projects in the substrate.
We had a chance to learn about proof of liquidity, how the gas-free economy works, how Mangata is solving the problem with front-running, and importantly, how you can get involved with the project while their roadmap is still evolving.
As always, I'm Cooper.
And I'm Arrow.
And we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, and thank you, Tommi, for coming onto the podcast with us. For everyone listening on Spotify, Apple Music, or YouTube, Tommi is head of communications at Mangata Finance, which is shaping up to be an extremely exciting project in the DEX space and beyond. Tommi, I know you're used to this question by now, but can you just briefly explain what Mangata is building and a little bit of background on how you got initially involved in the project?
Hi. Thanks for having me. We start with a very simple premise, and we think that DeFi is broken. Why do we say DeFi is broken? It has been broken from the very beginning. So when you look back at when Ethereum was built, it was built in 2014. And back then, the main concern was to just have a computer on a blockchain, a smart contract platform. It was designed to work, but just that. And the consequences of that are hurting us today when it comes to DeFi. And there are many different problems, but let me start with a very simple one. The gas costs you're having on DeFi, on Ethereum, are just exploding. And everyone who has been using DeFi and Ethereum is aware of this. And there are many more other problems that are coming up. For example, when you're trading on any DEX, and a lot of people don't know this, a bot can come in, can steal from your trade the little bit of slippage that you're allowing. So maybe to explain a little bit about what is slippage. So let's say you're trading. You want to buy Ethereum versus Bitcoin or maybe a stable coin like a US dollar similar coin. Every time you do that trade, the trading app that you use shows your price. But the price can change at any point in time. And so what you have to do is you have to say under the hood, I'm willing to accept that the price changes just a tiny bit. So if it changes by 0.5%, I'm totally fine with this. But over time, developers have realized that they can see your transaction when it comes to the blockchain, and they could manipulate the price just a tiny bit to steal that amount of slippage that you're willing to accept right under your nose. This is called front running, and it is one of the many problems that we are seeing on Ethereum. And the founders of Mangata have been actually builders of bot themselves. So they have used bots on Ethereum to participate in a trading activity, and they saw that it became a bigger and bigger problem that they were running regular arbitrage bots, but those front running bots were coming in and stealing their trades. And it's becoming a problem for regular users. It is becoming a problem for developers of bots and other integrations. And so they have been looking for solutions, and they looked at different spaces like Cosmos, Polkadot, Avalanche, and so on, and eventually decided to go for Polkadot because Substrate is a very powerful technology that allows us to change the rules of the game, to change the rules of the blockchain, and solve a lot of the big problems that we're seeing in Ethereum right now and that we're seeing in other spaces. So one very simple example, gas fees. When you're trading in DeFi, you're not only paying the exchange commission, which is usually like 0.3%, but you're also paying gas costs on the network. And the gas costs have the idea of preventing attacks on the network. But the result for you as a user is that you're paying two types of fees. You're paying the gas costs and you're paying the exchange commission. So couldn't we find a solution where you make sure that you prevent attacks on a network because you're paying an exchange commission, but it's just that exchange commission and not additional gas costs? So Mangata has been looking for several of these problems, and possible solutions of that. And that is sort of the core premise of what Mangata is. We look at the big problems of DeFi and we try to find solutions.
Incredible. Yeah. Tommi, a big part that a lot of the community is really excited about with Mangata is that no gas fees. Can you just touch on how that really works?
Yeah, sure. So usually gas, the idea is that every transaction you can perform on a network, in the ideal world, it should be free. But now you can imagine, and this actually happened on Ethereum in the founding days, in 2014 or so, or 2015 or 16, that users or malicious actors tried to attack the network. So they spammed thousands of transactions onto the network. And it brought the network to their knees. And so the solution against that is that every transaction costs a tiny bit of tokens. So that's gas costs. It prevents the attack on the network. Now, the assumption is that you have to calculate the complexity of every transaction, and as complex as it is, as expensive it should get. Now, the idea when you have a very DeFi or very app-specific chain, Mangata is not a general purpose chain. You cannot do everything on Mangata. You can do swaps. You can perform basic DeFi activities. And so since the set of activities that you can perform on Mangata is very constrained, we can look at it and we say, okay, every swap has an exchange commission. So how expensive is the swap? And if the exchange commission is over a certain threshold, like a few cents, it would be too expensive to spam a million of those swaps because you would be paying a little bit of exchange commission each time. So the exchange commission that any user is paying can act as a spam prevention at the same time while it is also being taken as a reward for liquidity providers, for example. So the basic idea is just that look at what actually is going on chain and see if you can find any synergy between the different mechanisms that haven't been tapped into before.
Interesting. And this is all being done with the Themis protocol that Mangata has been creating?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different solutions that are being implemented in Mangata. Gasless swaps are just the most prominent ones because it's easy to explain. Themis protocol, which you're mentioning, is a specially designed protocol against front running. So front running is this activity of a bot sees that you posted a transaction to the chain and it finds a way to exploit your transaction. In traditional finance, this is a highly illegal activity to front run any big market activity. And in DeFi, it happens with every single block you see in Ethereum today. And so Themis protocol is our name, or Themis architecture actually is our name for the architecture in which we have changed the way that blocks are produced so that we can prevent this type of front running. And to put it in very simple terms, front running happens when a bot sees your transaction. So what you can do is you can split up the transaction in actually two steps. So in the first step, the transaction gets accepted on the chain. And in the second step, it gets randomized in a way that an attacker cannot predict how each of those transactions are playing out. Even further, we are about to release, or not about, but we're currently working on this and we have the specification done. We are going to release a version of Themis architecture where you can have private transactions, which means the transaction is encrypted when it enters the meme pool, and the contents of the transaction cannot be seen until the moment when it is getting accepted into the block and actually executed on the block.
Wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard of like an encrypted transaction on a DEX. Is that something that's like kind of being done first time ever?
Well, there is a little bit of an irony here. There is a little bit of an irony here because you see this. So I've been touching on the topic of front running, but the rabbit hole here goes much, much deeper. This is the topic of minor extractable value, or sometimes it's called maximum extractable value, MEV. And MEV is basically the practice of node operators running, actually intending to secure the network, and they are the closest one to the mempool and to the place where the transactions get submitted. Now, when those node operators, those nodes are colluding with malicious frontrunners, this is called MEV. And the interesting thing about MEV is that now Ethereum, the whole Ethereum economy starts to focus around MEV. So all the big actors, all the big institutional players that transact a lot of money are aware of the topic of MEV. But a lot of the regular people, of the so-called retail users, are not so much aware of the topic of MEV. And so MEV is this whole scene and economy of people building better and better bots that try to outcompete each other on who is the best in stealing from other users. And the way that the people that are aware of MEV try to protect themselves is that they're actually paying the MEV enablers, the nodes, to keep the transaction private for as long as possible. So they pay the node to have it in a private mempool and only keep it there in the private mempool. So it's not really encrypted, but it is kept obscure from a lot of the other actors in the network. But the funny thing is, you never can really trust an MEV node to really keep your transaction private. It could totally happen that the MEV node knows about your transaction and then sometimes cheats on you, sometimes know what you intend to do and still tricks you. So yeah, maybe to get back to your question, we think this is the first time that this is implemented on the base layer, on the consensus layer, that you can have a private transaction that is being encrypted and is not visible until it gets actually executed.
Oh, okay, awesome. I was going to get into the validator nodes in a little bit, but before we get there, just regarding the Ethereum and DOT, is there anything? Is there going to be more support outside of that as those chains in the future with Mangata?
Yeah. So our long-term vision is to, or I like to call it our long-term vision, to support all tokens from all chains. I think this should be the ideal, especially when you consider a multi-chain world. And why not? I mean, there are so many great ecosystems out there. I think there is a lot of great stuff being done on Cosmos, on Avalanche, and also the ecosystems where I'm not the biggest fan of. I'm certain there are very many great people there that are having just great products in the pipeline. And so having a DEX that connects to all chains and supports all tokens would be the ideal. But it's still a way there. I mean, if you look at the ecosystem right now and how quickly bridges are developing, it's a hugely complicated task, a hugely complex task. And we keep building our technology, and we are looking at the space where bridges are being built. And as soon as bridges are being ready, we will take a look, implement the best we can find on the market at that point in time, and connect out to the world.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was going to mention. Is it's going to be done by bridges, and I mean potentially even those other ecosystems could build the bridge towards you guys too, right?
Yeah,
I was just
right.
going to mention. Yeah, I was just going to mention. On top of that, what kind of fiat on ramping is planned for Mangata users?
Yep. Maybe to elaborate on the bridge topic for just a second. So I think Composable is doing a great deal on connecting to the Cosmos ecosystem. We see that Darwinia is putting in a lot of good work to build out their bridge technology, and the Snow Bridge, which is sort of the semi-official bridge being developed by, I think, some entity that is getting a grant from the Web3 Foundation, is also, I think, in the final touches. So I think we should see something there. Regarding a question on on-ramps or fiat on-ramps, so people have been complimenting our user interface that is very user-friendly. I think we can always improve, and we're actually also already working on the next iteration of our user interface to support micro app architecture. And we think that having a user experience is going to be hugely essential for the next phase of crypto when more people are onboarding. And right now, wallets are not really very user-friendly. I mean, Polkadot.js is famous for its bad user experience, but in my opinion, every wallet is offering a bad user experience. It's getting better, but it's still not where it should be when you just compare it with how traditional finance works, where you just use your card, you use your mobile phone, and everything is done in seconds. It's sometimes still a hassle, but it's done in seconds. Crypto has other advantages. I mean, I can send money to a friend within like seconds. Yeah, on Polkadot, it is there in seconds. It's there in less than a minute, which is better than traditional finance. But wallets need to get better, and I think we will see huge steps in the coming years. And there is one critical element missing that I'm still looking for, and that is the way how wallets and chains actually talk with each other. I think chains need to tell a wallet how to use it. So what is for example, doing a swap on Mangata can be a very simple activity, but you should also be able to stake as simply. The chain should tell the wallet about the basic functionalities it has, so that when you're connecting to a chain, you might even see a little dashboard that is specific to that chain and allows you to perform the most common task that you see in that chain. I can see a point in time coming where you would spend most of your time in your wallet and not in the front end of another chain, maybe.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially actually that hits on a couple of the questions that we've been taking from the Mangata community as well, related to analytics. So that was kind of a big talking point that a lot of people had, where they're wondering what kind of analytics can Mangata provide for the end user so that they can track things like this.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think we need to get the basic work done, which is provide analytics that are comparable to other DEXs. So this is the basic trading volume, price development, rewards, and so on. And beyond that, I think that being able to inspect the chain state as easily as it is possible on substrate-based chains opens up a lot of possibility to build out better analytics. I would hope that we are, and the interesting thing is actually, so we made some user experience interviews with liquidity providers from all ranges. So liquidity providers that provided a few $1,000s to liquidity providers that are in the institutional sector and providing 6 or 7 figures. And there is a little bit of a difference. So the institutional investors, they run their own analytics, they run their own numbers, they have the tooling and the power to look at it on a much higher level than we are used to. But for the regular user, they have to rely on whatever tools they're given. And what liquidity providers are really unhappy with is that they're not really having a transparency on what they're really earning. That they're being shown huge numbers of big APY, big APR, but it doesn't land in reality. It's not the truth. And we're not even talking about the big numbers that make your dreams go up, but even the numbers that you see, even counting over 3 days, it doesn't ever add up what you see on the user interface, what you should have after 3 days with what you're really seeing. I think a lot of front ends are cheating here, and I think we could just provide a great improvement here by being able to show better numbers or more truthful numbers. I think this is a very simple goal, but it is the first goal before you think about big insights or net flows of values and so on.
Okay, that makes total sense. And just while we're on that topic regarding coins that come onto Mangata, regarding like privacy and making sure that there's no unethical coins that come onto Mangata, how do you guys vet those projects that come onto your project?
It's a good question, and it wasn't discussed yet really in the community. We did have some discussions on Mangata, but To give you my opinion, I think I don't think there shouldn't be too much vetting. I think so. Our basic intention is to have Mangata be as permissionless as possible. Right now in Substrate, you see a very large tendency to govern everything, including the creation of pools. And Mangata is designed to be permissionless in pool creation. So we have bootstraps going on. So we exert a little bit of control here. But it will be possible for any token that is coming on chain and that is not in a bootstrap that you can just create any pair that doesn't exist yet. So pair creation is permissionless. And my guess is once we have Ethereum live and going, that also depositing any ERC20 token or any other token should be permissionless. So personally, I'm not of the opinion that you should control every aspect and control the listing of every token. Because people, this is a lot of what crypto is about, is that people can make their own decisions. And this includes that people will make stupid decisions. But it's not especially the job of the DEX to protect them from stupid decisions. And if someone wants to build a DEX that protects people from stupid decisions, that's also fine. But I don't think that it's too realistic to be able to protect people from making stupid choices. And quite to the opposite, people need to make their own choices so that they can grow and learn from their mistakes. So I would say permissionless is the way to go for us.
Yeah, it's really well put. I mean, there's got to be a fine line of, governance and, where to stop by, telling people what to do and what they can't do. There's a fine line for sure. Was hoping to get into the validation aspect. What would someone need to run a node on Mangata? Hardware and token count minimums potentially.
Yeah. So to run a node on Mangata, we're going to touch the topic of proof of liquidity in a second. But so as of today, you would need a node that is, you could run the minimum specification of a substrate node, which you can get in the cloud for $40, $50 a month. You could run it. I think people are suggesting a price point around $100 per month so that you get more performance from the node, which gives you a little bit of a better performance when collecting error points, which is essential to get the highest rewards as a node. And in terms of capital, it's not really clear yet because we're just in the process of transitioning to permissionless node operations. My guess is at the moment that the capital needed in delegations, which is it's not the node operator has to bring up the capital on his own. He or she just needs to get the capital delegated by other liquidity providers, would be around $10,000 to $50,000, $10,000 to $60,000 is my guess at the moment. So $50,000, $60,000 is the upper point. This is where you would have a guarantee to be in the active set. Now, I mentioned the point that is maybe more interesting because we are a little bit different in how you run a node at Mangata. So the basic assumption is that you have proof of stake, a delegated proof of stake system like you have it in Polkadot, Kusama, but also, I'm not sure how it works in Cosmos, but for example, the delegated proof of stake system that Polkadot works with is based on the Ouroboros from Cardano. So every delegated proof of stake system has this system where the node operator accepts nominations from other capital holders. And once he has enough nominations, the node gets into the active set. Now, we have a slightly different take on this, and that is that at Mangata, you're not staking native tokens, but instead you're staking liquidity. This has several different reasons, but the main reason is when you have a system like Ethereum, you can make a decision of staking your ETH or using it in DeFi, but you cannot do both, which is capital inefficient because the token now gets locked in one activity while you might find ways to employ it in two different activities. And this is what we're doing in proof of liquidity. So we are optimizing for capital efficiency by allowing you to stake LP tokens. And those LP tokens are then used to secure the network. And at the same time, they keep working in the liquidity pool to facilitate the trading and exchange activity. So it's a 2-in-1 solution, and we're calling it stake once, earn twice, because you have your one liquidity, but you're getting liquidity mining rewards, you are getting the validation rewards, and in truth, you're also getting the liquidity provider fee. So it's our take on improving capital efficiency, and it works because we're a DeFi specific chain where capital efficiency is just important.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds like it's such a novel thing, and it almost makes you wonder why it hasn't been explored in the past. But it also kind of brings up an interesting question that we've seen floating around in the Mangata community for a little while now, and that is, does that now mean that there's double the risk for anyone who's staking to experience impermanent losses?
Yes, it's a great question, and I haven't seen it be asked too often, so I'm glad we can talk about this. Yes, when you are getting any promise of rewards, there has to be a risk attached to it, else it couldn't be solid. So what is the risk-reward profile here? It is basically a combination of the individual risk-reward profiles of liquidity mining and network-level staking. So liquidity mining, the reward is liquidity mining tokens, and the risk is that you're exposing your capital to impermanent loss, to the risk of impermanent loss, which means that if there is a lot of directional activity between two tokens and one token gets much more valuable than the other token, you would be better off just not providing liquidity. But liquidity is essential for the market to be able to move. So this was the problem in the pre-2020 era. And in 2020, the idea was originated of or implemented that by paying liquidity providers with tokens, with additional rewards, they suddenly got incentivized to provide liquidity. So they are getting an offset. They are getting basically a compensation for the impermanent loss. Yeah? So this is the risk reward of liquidity provision. How much impermanent loss do you occur versus how much rewards do you get? And everyone should and must do this calculation if they consider liquidity provision, because this is the bread and butter of doing this kind of trading or investment or savings activity. And now the other side is the network level staking. What is the risk reward here? The risk is that you could lose your capital if your node performs the wrong activity. And the reward is the validation reward. So what could be the wrong activity in a network level staking? Usually on a parachain, there is no risk because nodes are only collating blocks. The worst thing you could happen is the node collates the wrong block. But to my understanding, this is usually not punished. So for most parachains, there is not really a risk in staking. It's a pretty risk-free activity, to my understanding. But Mangata actually, so usually only the relay chain secures against wrongly constructed blocks, against double spending, and all of the stuff that we have blockchain for. But now Mangata is securing against the new type of attack vector, and that is not a purely security attack vector of falsifying information on a chain, but it is rather an economic attack vector, and that is front running. So by providing security against front running and mine extractable value, you can secure the system. And that means that any node that is not behaving according to the rules of the Themis architecture should be punished and should be getting slashed some of the tokens. So the activity of delegating in proof of stake and proof of liquidity is to delegate to a node that you believe will act honest. Yeah. And so if you lie both of these risk reward profiles over each other, this is basically what you get.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's why nominating proof of stake is so important. You have to trust who you're nominating, and they have to be an active community member.
And just as much with proof of liquidity in this instance as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. Just regarding the community, how can community get involved with governance discussions, or is that a little bit ways away still? And even how can they get involved with helping moderate and becoming a Mangata pioneer?
Yeah, right. Okay, let's start with getting active, and then I will get into the governance discussion. Getting active. So we are mostly active on Discord. We also have a Telegram and a little bit of a Twitter community that likes to like, people just chatting on Twitter. But the most activity you see in Discord. We try to focus on building a community that gets So our ideal community is a community of people that teach each other how to do trading, how to do liquidity provisioning, how to look at data on chain, and just get better at their investment activity. Because I think there is still a lot of potential, and I think it's one of the most worthwhile communities where you get smarter and you basically get the alpha. So this is our goal for building a community, but it's a lot of work, and it's sort of goes in lockstep with growing our utility, growing the features that we're having, and how much TVL we have on chain, and so everything is connected here. But to get active, I mean, like, just talk to us. We try to share some insights. If you have questions, if you think we can share some insights, I think this is usually the best way, is by stimulating us into sharing our knowledge, because it's a very unique position to be part of a parachain team. You are connected to all the builders. You are connected to all the other teams. You have a lot of calls with other teams where you share more private discussions about how you think and feel about the ecosystem. And parts of those discussions then are distilling or bubbling up and being shown in the exchange with the community. So what we want to focus on in the coming weeks and months is to share more of the big discussions that are happening in Polkadot and crypto in general, because we think that everyone can step up in crypto and in the decentralized world to be a leader and to lead the whole movement. And I think it needs all of us to educate other people. And so we'll try to do our part here. So if you want to be part of the Mangata community, I think the best way is to ask smart questions or to say smart things. And then regarding governance, so we believe in progressive decentralization. And that means that, first of all, number one, we are the biggest fans of Mangata at the moment. We are the ones originated in, we are the ones investing the most, and that is at the time of our life. So I think the time you have in your life is the most important thing, but also our money. So we are spending money to build this up, of course, in hopes of building a successful model where we can get rewarded. So in the ideal world, at some point, Mangata is fully decentralized, and it is making on-chain, the chain itself is making revenue, and it is paying its service providers. And in this ideal world, Mangata would be, so Mangata, let's say the legal entity, is a service provider for Mangata, the blockchain, and is getting rewarded for that activity. That means that the chain itself, as a sort of a entity, needs to make enough revenue to pay for its operations and maintenance. So this is the goal. And how do we get there? The idea is progressive decentralization. So initially, and as of now, we still hold the pseudo key, and it's a hotly debated topic. And the idea is to eventually give up on pseudo. So now, what is required? So pseudo is the master key to control everything. What is required to give up pseudo is basically a working democracy, or working group of people that works together, that makes the important decisions. So our big milestone here, the next big milestone here, is to set up a council that I suspect will mostly consist of people very close to Mangata, maybe people that have high stakes in Mangata. And I would love to see community members stepping up and wanting to participate in this. Maybe community members that have their own stakes in the network. And I think building a deliberate culture of governance is the hardest part and is the most important part. So it's easy to say, okay, every parachain builds on Substrate, and Substrate is a DAO out of the box if you want. You could just turn the key right now, and you could say everything is a full democracy. Parity is building the tools to make everything even build out democracy even further. But the hard part is to make it a good democracy, to make it a democracy that is actually producing good results and governing the chain, because governing means taking up responsibility, means spending a time thinking about proposals, thinking about the impact of every economic action that the chain is taking, every feature that is being accepted, and so on. So it's a hugely responsible task. And finding people that take the responsibility by developing the right culture is one of the most important investments a chain or a community needs to make. So we are thinking about this a lot, and we are working towards establishing a council that takes on the job of accepting runtime upgrades, making all important governance calls, and so on. And yeah, I would like to see this happen on Kusama within a few months. We are still internally working on the roadmap, but we will publish it soon, and then start to invite people to become part of the process.
Yeah, it's been, like you said, very, very apparent in the community that people are valuing the organic approach that you're taking to doing this, because it's almost sounding like it's a half governance platform, but also ambassador program at the same time. And I think that's got a lot of people really interested. So very excited to see that roadmap.
Yeah, so we have been holding back on an ambassadors program. I think this was mostly my personal choice because I wasn't convinced of many ambassadors programs I was seeing out there. I joined crypto in 2017, but then during the last big bear market, I was basically sleeping like a bear. And when I woke up in 2021, the ambassadors program I saw, I didn't like them. I wasn't convinced of them, most of them. There are a few good ones out there, but most of them were just people getting paid to show the hell out of a project, and I didn't want Mangata to go this route. So we didn't have an ambassadors program, but yeah, we started to change our mind. We started to say, okay, it should be. We see good ambassador programs out there, so let's think about how we can build a good ambassadors program. And I think it goes back to the core idea of what is an ambassador. Ambassador is a person that is connecting other people. I have one highlight, one community member who just did so much good for Mangata by being an ambassador in the truest sense. This is King Charming, and King Charming just connected us with Oak Network, which is now at the moment our closest partner, and we're doing great deal of work with them and having a very great collaboration. And he introduced us to each other. And what he also did is he introduced me to JC, who is now our community manager. So I think ambassadors are people that are just connected. They do not belong to Mangata. They maybe they see their home in different projects, and they are connecting people. These are outgoing, extroverted people that like to talk about projects, that may be organizing events in the real world, that may be going to conferences and representing there. And so we took a step back and we were thinking, what does the ideal ambassador actually look like? And you see the description I'm giving, this is the ideal person. So not everyone is interested to become an ambassador for our project just because we think this is ideal. So the idea is to basically invite people to think about all the great things we're doing. And if they become really convinced about it and really excited about it, invite them to share a part of the journey with Mangata. And of course, we think about a proper incentive model that should reflect the value that people are adding by being a real ambassador in the true sense.
Yeah, it sounds as organic as possible just by listening you talk about it. So actually, that brings us to a really good ending point for this episode. So Tommi, you've been a wealth of knowledge. You've been fantastic to talk to. And is there anything that you wanted to just put out there? Any links or websites you want people to go to when they listen to this?
I would say if you like what you hear today, I invite you to take a look at the Mangata roadmap, or to take a look at the blog. Take a look at the blog. I think this is the best source of where you can just see what we're up to, what we're looking into. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you see the core features that we are working on fleshed out. I think there is a lot of stuff to learn there, even if you're not convinced about every feature. But I think learning about stuff and thinking about it is the best way to educate yourself about crypto. So if what you hear today made you interested in Mangata, visit the Mangata blog. It's on the webpage, mangata.finance. Of course, follow us on Twitter and Telegram and YouTube. But just take a look at the blog and see what is there for you. We try to provide value.
Awesome. Thank you, Tommi. We're going to make sure we put all the links that you just talked about into the description for this, just to make it easier for people to find you, because like we've said, your project is super interesting. It's looking like one of the hottest projects that we've heard about. And we just wanted to thank you again so much for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's very great that you're building out this podcast. I think it's very much needed, and you're a great host.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
That means a lot. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks again, Tommi.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks for joining us for block number 3 of the podcast. A big thank you to Tommi for taking time to sit down with us and talk about Mangata and all the exciting things that help set it aside from other DEX projects.
We'd also like to thank the Mangata community for submitting questions through Twitter and Telegram for this podcast. We'll have links in the description for where you can also participate in having your questions asked in future episodes.
And of course, we'll have all the links below on how you can learn about Mangata, and we encourage you to definitely check them out and become part of their community as well.
As always, I'm Arrow.
And I'm Cooper.
And we'll see you in the next episode of Let's Talk NodeSense.